Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the stories of two incredible figures who used the tools they had, their words, as powerful weapons in the fight to end slavery in America. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to follow Frederick Douglass's unbelievable journey. Then we'll check out William Lloyd Garrison and his powerful newspaper. And finally, we'll see how these two men joined forces and, well, changed everything. All right, let's start with Frederick Douglass. This is a man whose own life story became one of the most effective weapons ever used against slavery. So you have to ask yourself, how does this happen? How does a boy who is forbidden by law to read become a world-famous author? Well, it all starts with a simple forbidden act that would change his life forever: learning to read. It all kicked off when Sophia Auld, the wife of his enslaver, started teaching him his ABCs. But her husband, Hugh, found out and he completely forbid it. He said that if an enslaved person learned to read, it would forever unfit him to be a slave. And for Douglass, hearing that was like a lightning bolt. He suddenly understood. Knowledge is power. It's the path to freedom. So he kept learning in secret. And then he went even further. He started teaching others. This timeline just shows you how incredible his path was. He was born into slavery around 1818. In 1833, he was sent to a man known as a slave breaker, Edward Covey. Just imagine that. But by 1838, he escapes to New York, marries the amazing Anna Murray who helped him get free, and just 7 years later, in 1845, he's a published author. What a journey. And you know, a huge turning point for him was that time with Edward Covey. After months of just brutal, non-stop abuse, Douglass fought back, physically fought back. He later wrote that this one act was everything. It brought back his spirit, his will to be free, his sense of his own humanity. It completely changed him. So in 1845, he unleashes his story on the world. This book, it was his ultimate weapon. And it was so powerful, so well written, that a lot of people just couldn't believe a formerly enslaved man wrote it. They were wrong. And with that book, he grabbed the nation's attention and forced people to confront the reality of slavery. Now, while Douglass was fighting with the power of his own story, another man, William Lloyd Garrison, was fighting the same battle with a totally different kind of weapon. Garrison didn't come from much. He started as a young apprentice at a printing press. But that's where he found his life's mission. He realized he could use this machine, this technology, to fight injustice with printed words. And his weapon of choice? An anti-slavery newspaper he called The Liberator. And he wasn't kidding around. For 30 years, week after week, he used that press to demand one thing: the immediate end of slavery. Garrison's whole strategy was honestly pretty genius. He argued that just changing laws on paper wasn't going to cut it. To really, truly end slavery for good, you had to get into people's heads. You had to change their hearts and their minds. So, what happens when one of the most powerful voices for freedom meets one of the most dedicated publishers in the country? Well, you get an alliance that would completely shake the foundations of America. And what's so fascinating is how perfectly their skills just clicked together. You had Douglass, this incredible speaker and writer with this unbelievable life story. And then you had Garrison, the guy with the printing press, the platform to share that story with the entire world. For a while, they were an absolute powerhouse team. Garrison acted as a mentor, really taking Douglass under his wing. Douglass became a star writer and speaker for the cause, working right there on The Liberator. His fame just exploded, and it brought massive attention to the movement. But, and this is a big but, their partnership didn't last. As Douglass grew as a leader, he started to see things differently than Garrison. They had a huge disagreement over strategy, and it led to a very public and honestly a really painful breakup between two of the movement's biggest champions. So after their split, Douglass started his own newspaper in 1847. He called it the North Star. And just look at its motto here. It perfectly shows his vision. He wasn't just fighting for Black men. He was fighting for the rights of all people, men and women of every color. When you boil it all down, Douglass and Garrison were masters at using the technology of their time, stories, speeches, the printing press, to challenge a horribly unjust system. And that leaves us with a pretty big question, right? In our world, with the internet, with social media, what are our weapons? And how are we using them to fight for a better world?